Hi everyone. The ancestors of modern humans appeared on our planet about 200,000 years ago. Of course, they were strikingly different from us when it comes to mental capacities and skills, but many things have not changed since then. For example, we still need to get food. In ancient times, people did that exclusively by hunting and gathering, but today, we have special equipment for food production and genetic modification technologies. Still, in some places of our planet, people prefer to use centuries-old methods. Today, we'll tell you about the most unusual ways of getting food in the modern world. Let's get it on. Stealing from a predator. If you saw the animated movie The Lion King, you probably know that there's a rivalry between hyenas and lions. One of the reasons this enmity exists is because hyenas have a habit of stealing food from the lions. However, turns out that such behavior is also common among people who live in the 21st century. This practice is very common among representatives of the African indigenous Maasai people who live in the savannah in Kenya and Tanzania. The Maasai, numbering about 2 million people, still lead a very traditional way of life. One of their traditions concerns their diet, and in this regard, the Maasai habits are very different from other people's. It's a common practice for them to track the lions during the hunt and steal the prey killed by them. Well, judging by these pictures, the lions have long realized that it's better not to mess with the Maasai. How else could you explain that when a group of men appears on the horizon, these huge wildcats immediately interrupt their meal and run away? Usually after human raids, lions return to the place of eating, though instead of meat, they often find only bones. Mountain climbing. What could be cheaper than making ice? All you need is clean water and a cold place like a freezer. However, it might not be as simple for some people. For many decades, this hard worker from Ecuador earns his living by gathering this simple but much needed product. The tradition of collecting ice on the slopes of the highest places in Ecuador, Chimborazo, has been around for about 500 years. It all started during the Spanish colonization. The Europeans who arrived on the continent sent local people to get pieces of glaciers in the mountains so that they could cool fresh meat. In the last century, dozens of workers came here every day, but today, there's only one left, the hero of our history, Baltazar Ushka Tenasaka. Every day, he climbs a mountain over 6,000 meters tall and continues the work of his ancestors. Although Chimborazo is an extinct volcano and the likelihood of eruption is extremely small, it's still not zero. Several local cafes and restaurants have been cooperating with Baltazar for many years. They use the ice that he carries for making drinks, for example freshly squeezed juices. Although in the 21st century it's much easier to pour water into molds and put it into the refrigerator, they are happy to maintain the centuries-old tradition of their ancestors. Plus, as Baltazar puts it, the water from a glacier has a unique taste which is quite different from ordinary ice from a freezer. Rock climbing. The famous character from a children's fairy tale named Winnie the Pooh was ready to do anything to get his favorite treat, a pot of sweet honey. But even he certainly would have never gone this far. To get some honey, residents of the remote Nepalese village of Bujang have to risk their lives on a regular basis. The thing is, locals traditionally collect honey, descending on ropes from high, steep cliffs where bees like to make their hives. For obvious reasons, this often ends in tragedy. Usually, this process goes as follows. A team of several people heads to the rock. Some of them begin to climb the rock, while another remains on the ground and lights a fire. This is necessary in order to drive the bees away from the hives, otherwise they'll simply eat the uninvited guests alive. Meanwhile, climbers are almost blindly poking around in their hives, hanging over a precipice on a rope ladder. Honey seekers say that this tradition is no less than 1,000 years old. They go honey hunting twice a year, each time taking with them from 300 to 600 kilograms of honey. Eagle training. Eagles are perhaps one of the most majestic and intimidating birds of prey. The creature's long wingspan exceeds 2 meters, and its speed can reach more than 300 kilometers per hour. Usually, hunting with eagles looks like this. The bird flies above the ground for a long time, looking for prey. Then it hovers in the air for a few moments and swoops down at an incredible speed, grabs the prey with its powerful claws, and carries it away. By the way, an eagle can hunt quite large animals too, like young deer or roe deer. Humans don't hunt eagles though, it's just too dangerous, but they came up with something else. They learned how to tame these predators and use them for hunting. So back in the times of the Russian Empire, the emperors kept eagles to hunt wolves and foxes, and in some Central Asian countries such as Mongolia or Kazakhstan, this tradition is preserved to this day. Eagle hunting is practiced by local steppe communities that brought this tradition here many years ago. Every fall, Mongolia hosts a festival dedicated to this skill. To see these amazing hunts, many tourists and photographers come here every year. Fishing on horseback. What comes to your mind when you think of fishing? Probably fishing nets, rods, and hooks, right? It's hard to believe though, but in some parts of the world, people use horses for fishing. To be precise, such a type of fishing used to be common in different parts of Europe, but today it's only preserved in one Belgian village called Oostduinkerke. More than that, it's used only for shrimp fishing. Horses pull the fishing nets while the ubiquitously yellow-clad fisherman scares the coastal shrimps with his movements. As a result, startled crustaceans jump into the shallow waters and fall right into the trap. Then the fishermen get off the horses, clear the nets from crabs, jellyfish, small fish, and other animals, put their prey in the baskets, and go back home. Of course, in the modern world, shrimps and other seafood have long been caught by industrial methods, and this type of fishing, which is preserved today only in a few local families, is a tribute to tradition and a kind of bait for tourists. For example, a shrimp festival in Oostduinkerke alone attracts about 10,000 people annually. All of them are excited to see the ancient tradition with their own eyes. Foraging under the ice. In one of the northern provinces of Canada, there are small communities of Inuit or Eskimo who carefully protect their traditional way of life. One of their long-standing traditions is unusual and extremely dangerous blue mussel harvesting. Inuit gather them right at the bottom of the frozen sea at low tide. First, the natives make a hole in the ice crust for an adult to dive into. Then the fisherman gets into a fragile ice cave and collects mussels as quickly as possible. Because the white-blue walls can collapse at any moment, or the cave can get filled in with water from the tide. Mussel collectors only have 45 minutes to do the job. Despite the huge risks, the Inuit continue to maintain their centuries-old tradition and are deeply proud of their ancestral heritage. Night hunting. In some settlements in Japan, people traditionally catch sea snakes, which are often more dangerous than their land-crawling counterparts. This centuries-old industry on the tiny Kudaka Island was preserved to this day thanks to its courageous people. And we aren't talking about strong young men, as you might think, but brave old women. They wait until dark to hunt the sea snakes. At night, these creatures usually crawl out onto land to get some air and find shelter. That's when the hunters are waiting for them. These brave people don't even use any protective clothing either. After a successful hunt, the animals are usually cooked in different ways. There's even a legend in Japan that says a person who ate a smoked snake once can no longer be poisoned by its venom. Fishing with salt. It might be hard to believe, but the strange thing you're looking at is actually not a bamboo stick, but a live clam, which is considered a delicacy in many countries around the world. It's called a razor clam, and it usually hides in the sand, with only a small part of its shell visible on the surface. Do you think that people collect them just by digging up the sand on the beach? Well, not quite. This would prompt the clam to bury even deeper. Actually, they use ordinary salt, as these creatures are particularly sensitive to it. You just need to sprinkle it over the holes made by the clams in the sand and wait a few moments. After a couple of seconds, the clam, which begins to suffocate from the salt, will get out, and you won't even have to put much effort into catching it. Psst, dude, are you looking for new technologies and great gadgets? Are your thoughts focused on the future? Do you love huge vehicles and can't imagine your life without robots around you? Then visit TechZone and you'll find all this and more. The link is in the description. You interested? Great.